Good evening, Wild Rocket is here with you with the final episode of the Veganuary series. Today I want to talk about why I personally went vegan. I think this is honestly the best and most logical way for me to wrap up the Veganuary series that I've been doing over the course of the month. And I hope that my story can inspire you and hopefully think a bit about the kind of things that you can do to achieve more health and happiness, and to kind of think about some of your own reasons as to why you would take this step to make the switch to a plant-based, ethical, fruits and vegetables oriented lifestyle. I went vegan very simply because I had to do it. I had to go vegan. I didn't really have a choice. I wasn't forced to by any external person or source or influence. I was really compelled to by myself and by my own imperative as a conscious and compassionate and awake human being on this planet. It's something which I've subconsciously known that I would have had to do since a very early age. I remember being 5 or 6 years old and eating some chicken nuggets or something around the table with my family, and looking at my mum and asking her again and again, this mum, why do we have to eat this? This was a living creature. Why do I have to eat this? It just didn't feel right. But of course, as one grows up in this society, we end up suppressing our feelings because society tells us that a certain way of being and eating is okay regardless of the consequences. And as a child, you can't help but absorb all the information that's present in the world around you. As a kid, you just don't know any better. You don't know what's right and what's wrong, or what's ethical and what's compassionate. Well, you do know this. I mean, you do know this subconsciously, but that's not the message you're given by the society at large. For the most part, there are some exceptions. There are conscious families, there are vegan families, but these sources are few and far between. In any case, I always knew I had to do this, but then I suppressed it growing up, and that led to all kinds of health problems and issues, more psychological than dietary. But I did have some issues which I developed over the years. For example, when I was 18, I developed a persistent rash at the back of my neck, which wouldn't go away, but which went away eventually once I became a vegan. I had all kinds of issues as a younger man with depression, schizophrenia, ADHD, ADHD when I was a kid. So I had all these sort of complications related to health and diet, because I think I was compelled to live a standard lifestyle, and I was going to school every day, having to regurgitate information, having to eat bad food, and also having to more beyond the food. I mean, more profound in the food. I was taught to disregard the welfare of living creatures who weren't human beings. And I was taught that was a message that's given to you constantly whenever you go to a KFC restaurant, whenever you go to school and they serve you chicken tikka, whenever your family congregates around a big lamb, a big leg of lamb on top of a bed of rice, and that is just considered normal and that's unquestioned. That was insane to me. That was absolutely nuts. And I knew that to be true, but it wasn't until much later in life, really, because even when I was a young adult, I still believed eating meat, killing animals for meat was wrong, and I would still tell people and myself that I would like to be a vegetarian, but I can't do it. And why? People would ask. Well, because you need meat for protein, and of course, people would agree with you because that's the consensus all round. Of course, I genuinely believed for many years, from a technical standpoint, even though it was at odds with my ethical intuition, that you needed to eat meat for strength, for protein. Whatever this protein, abstract notion of what protein is, you needed meat for protein. And I internalized that, and mostly because, mainly because I believed it, but also because I had no sense of alternatives about other things that you could do, and other things that you can eat to give you strength and stamina and longevity and protein from plant-based sources. I didn't know what those were really. So that changed at about March 2012. A friend of mine had sent me a documentary, a really fascinating one. A friend, by the way, who was about as far as possible from a vegan as you could possibly get. But nevertheless, they forwarded me this documentary. I'm not quite sure why, looking back, because at that stage I talked a bit about wanting to eat a more plant-based diet, but it was only in bits and bobs, not really to this person. I had not really talked about it to this person. I was still eating meat. It was not a primary concern in my life. But nevertheless, for some reason, this person forwarded me a documentary. And this documentary was really interesting because it talked about... This documentary was basically a documentary to promote the raw food diet, and it featured as its centerpiece people in America who had been diagnosed with all kinds of diseases, from cancer to Alzheimer's, who, when put on a kind of plant-based diet and remedy... By the way, don't ask me what the title of this documentary is because I completely forgot. It had David Wolfe in it though, the famous raw food guy who makes the blenders. And yeah, it was basically a group of people, mainly in the States, who were talking about how eating fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and incorporating as much raw and unrefined food as possible, salads, smoothies, and different creations like that could really dramatically improve your health and prevent you from getting all kinds of diseases. And that really set me off. That really switched a light bulb on in my head. It's like, wow. Because I didn't know at the time, but internally it was activating everything I knew to be true, but I just didn't have an outlet for it. It activated everything I knew to be true. And of course I didn't go raw overnight because, it was just a documentary, but it's planted a seed. It planted a seed that continued. And by the way, I saw this documentary maybe in the winter of 2011, so I was still eating meat at that point. But it wasn't until March 2012 when I continued to do some research on the raw food and started to learn about things like making smoothies, putting almonds in smoothies, and this concept of almonds being a high protein source. I never liked soy at all, so I never wanted to be a vegan who relied primarily on soy for my protein needs. But once I came across a lot of these people on YouTube and through various sort of education articles talking about almonds and how you can use almonds in smoothies as well as in salads as a very potent vegetarian protein source, suddenly I had actual alternatives to work with, and that was really inspiring to me. So at about March 2012, almost 4 years ago, I made the decision finally. I think it was the last time I ate any meat was when I was still in university. I was invited by a friend of mine just to have dinner with him. At that point, I'd been watching some ethical videos, and the ball was really rolling. This was, I'd seen the raw food documentary in winter of 2011. Come February 2012, I'd done a bit more research, seen a bit more stuff, begun to listen to my body and soul a bit more. But it was still early days, so I wasn't ready to give up meat just at that point. And then March 2012, I was invited to a friend who I'd had dinner with a few times before. We'd cooked together, we'd been out together, and so I went to his house, and he was making something which I'd eaten a billion times before as a young man. He was making a stir fry with chicken and shrimp and vegetables, things which I'd made myself and I'd enjoyed many times before. He was cooking that up together, and he was serving this up in bowls to me and his girlfriend and myself, and we were just eating it. And I remember just looking at it, and just before I started to eat it, like suddenly I just had this download, this weird inkling, but I still ate it anyway. I was still eating this meal. Just very basic Chinese style stir fry consisting of shrimp and chicken, and I was eating it. And I just had this, what went from a download to this really powerful internal shift. It was so powerful, I almost cried at the time. I finished the meal, but like with extreme reluctance. I noticed, I couldn't swallow properly. I was choking up because I was trying to eat but simultaneously crying. I suddenly had this vision. And this is profound and dramatic because it was, if I'm describing it. As dramatic as I might sound, it was even more dramatic at the time. I suddenly had this vision, which I never did, of the fish and the shrimp and the chicken which had died to be on my plate, suffering prior to death, and it was really powerful, and I'd never felt that before. I'd eaten meat before and felt that it wasn't right, but I'd never actually embodied the pain of an animal like I did that time. So I felt that, and it was very strong, it was very powerful. And it was so powerful that I knew basically by the time that meal was finished that was it, that I would never ever consume any living creature ever again. And that really set me in motion, I think. And that was a really beautiful time. I'm happy to say that, from March 2012 till now, I've not eaten any animal flesh whatsoever. That was really powerful and really positive. But I didn't become a vegan at that time. I only became a vegetarian. I still had to contend with trying to give up dairy. That was much more difficult. Giving up cheese was milk was easy. I was never a big milk drinker. Giving up butter was easy because I always disliked butter, even when I ate meat. Especially because I had members of my family who died of artery-related diseases, and that runs in my family quite strongly. I've had relatives, at least two that I can think of, who I can think of who died due to disease of the arteries. And anyone who knows anything about butter knows that it's extremely high in negative cholesterol and contributes to the clogging of arteries. So I always had a bad association with butter. Cheese was the most difficult thing because I had attachment to pizzas. So that took a long time to give up. And I didn't become a vegan really. Again, my life, this is quite a dramatic story, but until October of 2013, so a year and a half later, I was in Cambridge, where I was now. I wasn't living in Cambridge at the time. I was here to, I was just visiting Cambridge because there was places I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the cinema here. At the time I was suffering from a slip disc and extreme dissatisfaction with how my life had turned out. I was already experimenting with meditation at that time. I was very lucky that I had a friend who introduced me to a lot of stuff, and I was doing one of my early experiments with meditation, And at that time I had a near-death experience, and that was really powerful. And that wasn't really to do with food or animals at that point. It was much more fundamental than that. It was like a little signal from the universe that in order for me to continue to live and exist, I had to give up and release years of pent-up negativity and anger and dissatisfaction and bad energies in order to live the person that I was meant to be. And that was a really profound shift, that near-death experience. And I knew I really wanted to live a better and higher quality of life from then on. So after my awakening, I gave up meat. I gave up cheese completely. That was a bit harder, I think, going to Dubai. Giving up cheese was a bit, because there was so many times I just wanted to switch back, and I would, because of my love for pizzas when I was in Dubai, because as soon as I had like a month after my near-death experience, I moved to Dubai. Like for the first 4 months, I would do really weird things, like I would order pizza from local pizza chains and ask them not to hold the cheese, so they would deliver me a pizza with just tomato and bread. And then I would experiment with like making my own vegan toppings on it. I would put like avocados, I would put hummus, I would put this Arabic herb mixture called za'atar on it, and that was really fun actually. But it just goes to show how difficult it can be if you don't have enough inspiration and guidance and education from people, from mentors who can really not just criticize meat and dairy, which is easy to do, but to actually give you alternatives, to say, oh look, you can do this, you can make this salad, you can make this smoothie, you can make this salad dressing. I've been fortunate in that I've been exposed to quite a few people like that, and even though I don't know many vegans in person as of yet, it's still early days, it's still only 2 years and a half since I went vegan, so I don't know any vegans yet, apart from my cousin. My cousin and I think we're probably the only vegan which is close to me. So, thanks, cuz. If you're watching this, you're awesome, because we're the only two in our family who's doing this. Yeah, it's just us two. So I don't know many people yet, but as I expand my message and I continue to share from my health journey, I do hope I'm looking forward to meeting many others who have experienced something similar. So this was my story. I tried to keep it relatively short. I could go on and on about it, but I think I've given a pretty good broad overview of why I went vegan. Let me know if you found this video useful, if you have any questions or comments. As I gain more experience doing this, I'm sure I will make more videos explaining why I went vegan with more clarity, focus and useful information. But for now, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed this video. This has been really amazing and fun, and I just really feel good when I'm sharing with the world like this. It really is a blessing. It really is a release, because this is really all I have. This is like, when I'm making this video, when I'm making videos like this, I am saying my piece unadulterated. I've got full control over everything I say and do, and I can be myself 100%, and that's really important. So thank you so much for listening. It means a lot to me. This has been Wild Rocket with you from Great Shelford in Cambridge. Peace be with you all.